Sir Wayne McGregor komt half maart naar Schiedmacher met zijn eigen gezelschap en zijn gloednieuwe voorstelling UniVerse, A Dark Crystal Odyssey. Dat is niet alleen een aanrader voor dansliefhebbers, maar zoals de titel al doet vermoeden, is de inspiratiebron voor Wayne niets minder dan de beroemde cultfilm A Dark Crystal uit 1982 van poppenmagier Jim Henson, de grote man achter de Muppets. Die film mag dan al 40 jaar oud zijn. Hij heeft niets aan actualiteit ingeboet. Ging toen al over een noodlijdende aarde met een verdeeld ras en een extreem verscheurde aarde die snakt naar genezing. Wayne heeft toestemming gekregen om deze cultfilm te vertalen naar een koortsdroom op het podium, vol met levende dansers in magnifieke futuristische kostuums. Wayne is niet alleen gefascineerd door dans en techniek, maar ook door architectuur, door wetenschap en door alles wat zich in de digitale wereld afspeelt. Het zal u dan misschien ook niet verbazen dat de leden van ABBA bij hem uitkwamen om hem te vragen hun avatars te creëren voor de beroemde reunie en de concerttour The Voyage. En misschien nog een kleine hint voor filmliefhebbers. Wayne choreografeerde ook alle vliegbewegingen van de Harry Potter film Harry Potter en de Vuurbeker. Maar met zijn eigen gezelschap en de Royal Ballet, daar is hij huischoreograaf, maakt hij ook de ene na de andere bekroonde voorstelling. En nu dus deze Dark Crystal Odyssey. Een korte droom op het podium over de ecologische ramp die ons dreigt te overkomen. En tegelijkertijd biedt hij daardoor ook een beetje een uitweg door wat misschien wel die verdeelde groepen bij elkaar zou kunnen brengen. We spraken Sir Wayne McGregor over hoe hij ooit verslingerd raakte aan de dans. John Travolta speelde daarin een rol. Maar ook hoe hij die beroemde cultfilm, die fantasyfilm van Jim Henson, mocht bewerken tot dit bittere sprookje op toneel. We're looking forward to the performance UniVerse, A Dark Crystal Odyssey. It is your most recent performance, with your company.
It's almost. I've just made a recent piece that I opened at the Montpellier Festival called Deep Storia, but it's made within the last 12 months.
So let's go back first, 45 years back in your history. What was your first experience with dance?
Well, I think my mum and dad would say that I was always a very physical child. So I was always into gymnastics and moving around. But I think the very first experience of dance I had in school, in fact, we used to do a thing called English country dancing, which is a very old form of dancing. But it's kind of amazing because what you do in English country dancing is dance with other people. You are in relationship with other people, moving around to music, to rhythm. And I must have done that from about the age of 5 or 6. But the very first time I really felt really passionate about dance was when I saw John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever. And I love disco. I'm a 70s child. And it was the first time I just felt that somebody was dancing in such a free way, as if they were making it up as they were moving. And I absolutely love that.
And you imitate him?
Oh, well, I guess. I mean, I wanted to go for disco lessons. I wanted to learn the routines. I wanted to dance to those soundtracks. So I started disco and Latin American and ballroom dancing from the age of 7. And I did that right the way till I was 16. So, I have all of that kind of like social dance background in my history.
You did multiple things at one time together: science, technique, philosophy, innovation. How do you came across all these inspiration sources, all these things?
Well, I think I was very lucky. I was at a regular school, but I was at a school where they took academics very seriously. But they also really encouraged us to be involved in the art. I loved school. I loved being at school. I loved the creative freedom that the arts gave me, being in musical theatre or singing or plays. I played the violin, I played the tenor horn, I was in a brass band, I was in an orchestra. I did lots of kind of like music, but also I loved the discipline of learning and the curiosity of learning. And I think I was really lucky. I had good teachers that were inspiring. And, my English literature teacher, I remember when I was like 12, took me to my first Beckett play. And again, it just shows you the influence of people who inspire you, how they can make a big difference in your life. And we have that responsibility now as artists that have a longer career to actually give back and influence and inspire others.
And you was also 12 when the film A Dark Crystal of Jim Henson was released.
Oh, I really remember it. Yeah, I really remember it. Partly because it was so strange and odd and kind of scary. And now I look back at that, I didn't really know what to make of it at the time. It's an incredible film. It's a fantasy film. It's the first full-length feature film made only with basically people moving puppets or animatronics. And so the whole thing has kind of a hidden physicality. The puppets or the animatronics are moving, but there are all of the people that are moving them. You don't see, they're invisible. But the physical imprint is very distinctive, how they move, the way in which they move, the strangeness. But also it was one of the first films that I'd seen that was so kind of epic and fantastical and of another world. It felt, something that was unrecognizable with incredible music. And it really stuck with me. And actually about 15 years ago, I reached out to Henson's, who obviously made that film, and they made my first I made my first work with Henson's, which is a piece called Nemesis, where we actually made huge, large animatronic insect arms that extended the dancer's performance. And there was a little flick switch inside, and these arms flicked like a dangerous, lethal kind of like scorpion tail. And it was very kind of futuristic, the beginnings of robotics, really interesting new physicality. But that came from that very first interaction with A Dark Crystal.
So that was 15 years ago. Now is A Dark Crystal. The Dark Crystal is your inspiration source for this performance. Is there also an ecological message? Because the film is also about the Earth who getting complete, a complete disaster, more or less.
I revisited The Dark Crystal, a couple of years ago, and I realized that the environmental themes were very, very prevalent. The warning of the environmental themes. In the story of The Dark Crystal, it's about this crystal that is split, and there's a kind of a dark side and a light side, and the whole movie is about reconciling this natural energy to be able to fuel the earth. And if you think about it, it's very presentient, it's very kind of forward thinking at the time. But those kind of themes are so relevant to today, that we've got all of these schisms in kind of like the global population, where some people think about the climate emergency as a remote thing, where we all know really it's a personal thing. It's something that is really vital and important. And I wanted to make a piece that spoke to those themes, but didn't feel too heavy-handed, that through fantasy and through extreme imagination and other worlds, you could reflect back and comment upon the contemporary world. So in a way, you zoom very, very far out to be able to zoom really, really in.
And how did you translate the puppet film to the dancers on stage with their costumes and also a little bit futuristic science fiction costumes?
I usually work with different teams. And so I assembled a team that I knew would lean into this kind of like speculative fiction, this futuristic, this fantasy world in a really interesting way. I think from a movement point of view first, I was curious about how do you get the strangeness of physicality that is in the film, but through live bodies. So without the puppets, how do live bodies inhabit that kind of vocabulary? And so that was really a whole range of physical research experiments to work out how we might be able to do that in a really extraordinary way. And that was really fun. But also I was curious about how we might be able to work with costumes, sometimes extraordinarily simply, but sometimes really extravagant and really strange, that deform or give physical restriction to a body. At the same time, some of those costumes are made out of mushrooms. They've got an ecological kind of bent to them. We wondered what new materials that we would be able to grow to be able to create these incredible kind of organic structures. So there was a sense of the difference between the technological and the organic. And then finally, the big innovation, if you like, in the stage picture is that we wanted to work with a technique called hollow gauze, which is a gauze which you put on stage, which is painted in real silver, and it reflects light in such a way that everything becomes three-dimensional. It feels like you can be in the world, and the world comes out, and it's really rich and very, very vivid. And we wondered how that three-dimensionality of the visual picture, which is very rich and technological, could be contrasted or support or work with live dance and what that experiment might be.
And do you use also digital techniques for it?
Yeah, there's a lot of digital techniques in it that create almost like holographic images. And so sometimes, sometimes in a very desolate world, you can feel that you're in a very parched, desolate world that goes on for miles. Sometimes you're in the middle of a burning forest, or you feel like that. I think the idea, there's this concept called synesthesia. It's where all of your senses are mixed up. And I think one of the beautiful things about dance, the potential of dance, is that it can trigger a whole range of sensations that are precognitive or pre-brain. And that they all kind of like swim together. So we wanted to try and see how we might be able to do that, but then disturb them or twist them or change the hierarchy of them. And I'm really fascinated by that, and hopefully we've achieved that.
And maybe we can feel it like a fever dream?
It's like a fever dream. That's a perfect way to, and it's non-linear. I always find it very strange in dance that often critics want concreteness from the thing that they watch. And, that when they talk about narrative, they think about a narrative unfolding in a linear way and that everything is tied up very perfectly. But that's not how we experience life. I don't know all of the time exactly what I'm thinking. I don't know all of the time what's going to happen. I sometimes have a sense of something, and months later, I work out what that means. So meaning and sense aren't always directly correlated. Sometimes it's a very different and elastic sense. And I think dance does that amazingly. This impressionistic way of experiencing the world, which we all do, is something that dance reflects well. So I try and avoid the concrete. I like the ambiguity. I like the slippery. I like the audience to do a bit of the work. So to use their imagination to build a bridge between what we're offering on the stage or inviting you to participate on the stage and what you're feeling. And that active engagement is really important.
What you describe about the visual part of the performance also reminds me to your collaboration with the members of ABBA.
So we built a very big show in London called ABBA Voyage, which is a concert like no other. And already we've had 2.5 million people see it live, which is extraordinary. Of course, because of the power of the music of ABBA. But, the job of that concert was to build a kind of a version of a really sophisticated avatar show where you felt that ABBA were there in real life. And one of the challenges that we've had always with technology is that often, especially on stages, you feel that it takes you away from real physical presence. And there's a contrast between a real live, amazing physical dancer and these digital objects which feel kind of remote and distant. But with the ABBA Voyage concert, we've been able to create an illusion where you feel like ABBA from the 1970s are there in the room. You create empathy with basically light that is just flickering, and the audiences go crazy because you believe that they're there. And I think this is really one possible future for performance. It will never replace live performance, but as a parallel or as a supplement or as a different dialogue and conversation, it's very, very exciting.
It looks like that we are only being at the beginning of all these possibilities, eh?
Wow. But in any century, we're only at the beginning, and you work with the languages of the day. So I know there's a lot of concern around AI at the moment, and quite rightly, we have to understand the nuance of AI and how that works to make a contribution to it. But also the potential of these technologies. So the potential in AI is extraordinary.
You are not afraid of the dangerous side of AI?
Of course. I think we have to have responsible conversations about AI, but I think it's very easy to be polemic. It's very easy to go, AI, these are all of the problems. But that comes from really a lack of understanding about what that really means. When we say AI, what is AI? AI is such a complex field of experimentation. So I think part of the first step is for us all to educate ourselves more about what are all of these AI systems and what does that really mean, and then work out how we might want to work with them, how we might want to legislate for them, how we might want to work more ethically with them.
So when you was born in 1970, now this year, 2025, you will be 55.
I will, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and Schietmacher is celebrating the 30th edition this year, so this is jubilee. And now a lot of people who becoming 30 have to make very difficult choices in a difficult world. What is your advice to people who are now becoming 30? What is your advice?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's advice. I don't think you should ever trust an expert. I think for artists, I think there's a kind of a call to action. I hope that the climate, although of course it's very challenging, it's challenging in terms of resources and finance and governments cutting funding for the arts. And we see that across the world. But there has never been more of an important time for the arts to make a contribution than now. You know, young artists have so much to say. Young artists have so many things that they can teach us and show us and share with us. And they need to be encouraged and nurtured. My responsibility, the thing I can do as an older artist, is actually support that young generation as much as I can. I can share my resources with a younger generation of artists. That's something that we're doing a lot in the studio. So I can do my bit in that way. I can also champion other artists and help find opportunities for them. I can canvas the world and look for opportunities that might actually really be fit for these young artists who've got burning desire to make. But at the end of the day, you've got to make. You've got to get in the studio. You know, I started with no money, didn't know anybody in London. I was a real outsider. I just went into church halls, you know, school halls, worked with my friends for free at the beginning and just made things. I think you just got to make things. It's all right talking about making things, but you've got to actually do the action of making. And the more practice you have, you will find your champions. Your audience will come to you, but you've got to be doing it. Less of the talking, more of the doing. And I know it's hard, but you will find a way through. And I can't wait to see a lot of that work that's going to be made by incredible young artists in the future.
Thank you, Wayne, for this encouraging message and for also this call for action.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to UniVerse, a Dark Crystal Odyssey on the 18th of March in Heerlen.
Amazing.
Thank you. See you then.
Nice to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.